Alright, so I'm about to put this micro drone together. This will be a review that'll appear on the main channel a bit later, but I did want to sort of put together a short, kind of quick video on what goes into a drone build. There's lots of drone builds out there. Some of them are pretty long and can be kind of, I don't know, tedious in terms of like going over every little detail. But it's actually really simple. So if you're kind of looking for a simplified overview of like what goes into a drone, this is a good word. This is a good place to start. And then of course you can dive deeper into all the things that are out there in terms of like every little component. I'm going to talk about things here in terms of very generic terms because depending upon what components you select, your frame might be different, your motors might be different, your other electronics might be different. But for the most part, what you're going to see here in this video, you're going to see in pretty much every drone build that's out there, just in slightly different forms. So first off, we start off with a frame here. Typically, most frames here for a quadcopter, you have 4 motors. You have a place to mount your flight controller system, your electronics that powers the drone, and then some place to mount the camera. And then in this particular case here, the motors will go on this plate here, the flight controller will go here, and then there's going to be a top plate over here like this, and the battery will sit on top. In some drones, the battery will be on bottom. This particular model, it's going to be on top. And this frame here comes with these, basically a top plate, carbon top plate, and a carbon bottom plate, one piece. Other frames might have separate arms and basically plates on the bottom and top there to kind of sandwich the arms to hold it together, plus a bunch of screws. That might be easier for when you break an arm. You can easily replace that, for example. In a lot of micro builds like I like to build, typically you're going to have a single bottom plate for things that are under 3 inches, and that's going to be fine for most situations. Got metal cage here in the front for your camera protection. That's typical, or you might have carbon fiber in the front. For the FPV system, this one's going to have the DJI O3, so you have the O3 camera, you have the air unit or VTX, and then I already have the antenna installed into the TPU part of the frame that goes into the back, and you can see the standoffs here that go into the back like this. Of course, there's going to be some screws there that are going to hold it into place, but I'm just kind of illustrating that these builds can be pretty simple. You put the antenna here, you connect the antenna connectors to the air unit as such, and this is like basically this is what's getting video to your goggles. And in my particular case, I'm using a stripped down or partially stripped down, or also known as a naked O3 air unit, so just to save some weight and some space. And then I'm going with this flight controller. This one's discontinued, so I'm not going to give you any specifics about the flight controller. This is an all-in-one, so in some builds you're going to have a separate flight controller and 4-in-1 ESC, so they'll have 2 boards instead of a single board. This one here combines the flight controller and the ESCs into one board. So typically all of your flight controller components are going to be on the top of the board. You got your USB port here, and you have your motor pads here for your motor wires to solder those on, and then you have a bunch of pads here for your things like your components like your receiver, and also for your air units. So for example, I got a little cable here. I'm going to solder some, I think it's going to be down here somewhere, and then this solders onto the flight controller, and then this plugs into the back of the air unit. Very, very simple. Basically, you just have power, ground, and then your UART for TX and RX, and then over here somewhere is for the receiver, I believe, and I'm going to be going with this receiver here. I'm not exactly sure, but this is an Expert Solaris receiver. I'm not sure who the vendor is, but there's so many of them out there. And this is the documentation that comes with the flight controller. It's a Mamba F411 25 amp. But the important thing is you want to make sure you have this wiring diagram so you know where all your UARTs and components are supposed to go. Of course, what you select and the parts you use are going to be different, so it's going to be different from what I'm talking about in this video. Essentially, this is going to come with some screws, and you're going to mount it to your frame like so. And again, every frame is different, so you have to look at the diagrams for your particular frame to know where to mount your flight controller components, but essentially this is where it goes. And then in my case, I'm going to be using an XT30 battery connector. Looks like this. And it's going to solder on over here on this particular board, and it'll come up the top plate for my power for the battery. And then got some props here, 2.5-inch props. I think these are just some Gem Van props. I'm not sure exactly what size they are, but every build you're gonna need some props, of course. So that, and then of course you need some motors. So I got some RCN Power 1303. I think these are 5,000 kV. These will be pretty good for a nice, pretty powerful build. Actually, this will be, I think 1303 is a good size for 2.5-inch for power versus efficiency. So it's going to be a good blend of power and efficiency. And then all you do is, what you want to do is you want to mount the flight controller with the screws. Screws go underneath here, and you have a screw or a nut that goes on the top here to secure your flight controller in place. Make sure that's in place. Typically what I do is I will mount the motors and then solder them to the motor pads. So in this case, it's going to be over here and over here. So pretty straightforward, really. And then I'll probably put some tape here to hold the motor wires onto the arm so they don't move around. That's pretty much it. Once you get the motors on there, you solder on this connector for the air unit, and then you need to solder on the connectors for the receiver. That's going to go over here somewhere, and then you mount the receiver somewhere in your build. Again, I'll show you the final build when you see the review of this. And you're pretty much done. You put the top plate on, and that's it. Yeah, of course, you gotta solder on the battery connector. Very simple build. I'll probably do this right now. I'll be done in like probably 30 minutes for the whole thing. And then at that point, you do have to install Betaflight in this. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this build, show you what it looks like, and then I'll run you through sort of a very, very easy and basic Betaflight install that you can apply to pretty much any drone. So stay tuned. Alright, so I already mounted the flight controller to the bottom plate here and did a little bit of soldering already. I soldered on the little pigtail here for the O3 air unit, and it's just the 4 wires there. I'm not going to be using S-Bus, so the last 2 are not connected. It's just power, ground, RX, and TX. Got the XT30 connector soldered on to the board, and also tinned up the pads for the motor wires. They're going to go on, of course, in a moment. I did switch out the grommets here, these little silicone grommets. There were some blue ones here. There was a stock ones for this Diatone Mamba board, and I put some shorter ones in here so that the board is closer to the bottom plate here. I wanted more room between the all-in-one flight controller and the DJI O3 air unit. These are kind of little things you have to do to make adjustments as you do your build, because every frame, every build is going to be a little bit different. Now, I already kind of put together the top plate section here, so you can see I got the side plates for the camera, O3 air unit camera here, the top plate, and I got the O3 air unit screwed into the top plate. That's where it's going to be mounted. And I guess I said I was concerned about room there between this. I'll show you here in a second. And then I have the antenna on the little 3D printed mount here and the rear standoff. So this particular frame and build, it's pretty easy. Like, everything kind of goes together very nicely. You have this top section that just goes onto this bottom section here, like so. And then you just plug in this plug into the O3 area in the back, and that's pretty much it. But just wanted to show you here, one of the things you want to do when you're doing your build is always like test fit everything and make sure that things are lining up correctly. That everything is where you want it to be. And let's go ahead and line this up here. It's not going to be screwed in, but you can see here that I was overly cautious. I probably could have been fine with the blue grommets there. It would have been a little bit higher, maybe like a millimeter or 2, and you can see that I have plenty of clearance here, so no need to worry. I even stripped down the air unit to get a little more space here, because in this particular frame, there's not a lot of space between the bottom plate and the top plate. But as you can see, it's not going to be a problem. So now at this point, all I'm going to do is solder on my Express LRS receiver, and I already have these pads tinned here. I'm going to put it up here somewhere, and then I'm going to put the attach the motors on, solder them on, and this build's pretty much done because it's a pretty simple build with these all-in-one flight controllers, and then with the DJI O3 air unit, it's just a simple plug, and basically put two parts together, plug it in, and you're off and running. So at that point we'll do a Betaflight and ESC firmware install later in the video, but let's go ahead and get those motors on here and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so here is the Express LRS receiver soldered on to the appropriate pads, as well as all of the motor wires soldered on. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, you do need some experience with soldering, and I would definitely get some practice before you try and work something at least this small. Some of the bigger builds may not need as much practice, but for these tiny solder joints you will need a little bit of experience. So I highly recommend practicing before you actually work on your electronics. But this is what it looks like, and basically at this point you have the bottom part here. It's pretty much done. We're just going to stick on the top part, 4 screws to hold it in place. We're going to plug in the O3 air unit. I'm going to stick on the Express LRS receiver to the bottom of the camera there, and then the build will be pretty much done. I'll put it all together. I'll put the battery strap on there and put a battery pad in there as well, and I think that's going to pretty much do it. At that point we're going to go ahead and do the software stuff. Alright, so in terms of all the software setup, we're going to start off with flashing the ESCs with BlueJ firmware. So I'm going to plug in the flight controller via USB to my computer and power this up. And you want to go to your browser. You can use the Edge browser or Chrome browser and go to this URL right here, escconfigurator.com, and the USB port should show up in your configurator here. So if you go to open port selection, you can see the Betaflight flight controller is there. You hit connect and that should show up here, and then hit the connect button here, and then we'll go down to hit read settings here in the lower right hand corner. And as you see, this one has BLE S16.7, pretty old firmware. And I think I'm just going to go with default settings here. I'm not going to change anything. I do know that motors 3 and 4 will need to be reversed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'll flash all the ESCs. And we're going to change the firmware to BlueJ. It already auto-detected the target here, GH30, so leave that alone. And then you have different versions here. So we have 0.21, that's the latest version. I'm going to go ahead and select that. If you're watching this in the future, there might be a newer version out. And then I'm going to select 48 kilohertz for the PWM frequency, and we'll hit flash. And we'll wait for the ESCs to flash. I'll just go one by one. All right, so it looks like it changed the motor direction back to normal. I'm going to hit reversed here. And on both the motors 3 and 4, and then we'll just hit write settings. And I'll go ahead and write those settings. And now I think everything should be set. Go ahead and disconnect. At this point, you can go ahead and unplug your battery. All right, so for the Betaflight update, we're going to go to app.betaflight.com, and it is now web-based, so you can use Chrome or the Edge browser, and it is configurator 11.0. It might be a newer version sometime in the future, so be aware of that. I'm going to select the USB port here, and you can see that it finds the flight controller there. Hit connect, and let's go to hit update firmware, and we can say choose a board and hit the auto detect button here. Should be able to tell which board it is, and you can see that targets found, the Mamba F411, which is correct. And we're on the latest version is 4.5.1, so that looks all good. And we'll hit load firmware, and then we'll hit flash. And I don't care about the backup. If you want to back up your settings, you should do that depending on your situation, but this is a brand new build, so I'm just going to ignore that. And let's go to connect to the bootloader. I'm going to do that. There we go. And now we're flashing. Okay, so now we should be able to just go ahead and connect to the flight controller. All right, it says the accelerometer is not enabled but not calibrated, so we had to hit calibrate the accelerometer. It's on, make sure it's on a flat surface, and then we'll go ahead and check the drone is turning in the same way that the model is turning on the screen, and it is, so everything is good there. Go to the port section next. UART1 is actually my OSD for the O3 air unit, so I'm going to turn off Serial RX, turn on MSP, and then under peripherals I'm going to enable MSP display port, and then under UART2 is where I have the ELRS or Express LRS receiver connected, so it's going to be on UART2. I'm going to hit save and reboot. All right, reconnected again. Let's check in configuration, everything here. Now, I'm going to leave everything as defaults here, just for simplicity. We'll go to presets. This is where I'm going to try and find something that is going to work well with. This is a 2.5-inch build, so I typically like to go with not the experimental tunes. You can go with some of these. You can try them out, and if you don't like them, whatever, you can always just, reflash something else. But in this case, I'm looking for something that's a 2.5 inch, and I'm looking for these official build or these official tunes, the ones with green. I find that those seem to work better for just in general, and then of course you can use that as a baseline and kind of tweak it from there. So I'm thinking either 2-inch or 3-inch. I don't think there's specifically a 2.5-inch official tune, at least the last time I checked here. So yeah, so the one that I'd probably go with here is the UAV Tech, the micro 2-inch to 4-inch, which is obviously what we're looking at here. So I'm going to turn that on, and then you have different options here. So they have different kinds of filter options. This is a brand new build, I'm going to go with high build quality instead of medium. This is kind of up to you in terms of how you feel like, if you feel like you're going to crash a lot and have a lot of like bent props with a lot of vibrations, you may want to go for medium or low. Kind of depends on what you want to go for. You can enable RPM filter, which I'm going to do for this one since I installed BlueJ firmware, so I'm going to hit that. And then I'm going to hit 48 kilohertz here instead of 16 or 24, because that's what I flashed to the ESCs. And then I will turn on the dynamic idle feature. So I turned all those on, and we'll go ahead and hit, let's see, out of that, and then hit pick and hit agree. And then you have to hit the save and reboot, and then we'll apply all the PIDs and the filters for that particular tune to the flight controller without you having to mess with anything. So we can go ahead and look at what that looks like here under PID tuning. And yeah, we see we have a few different changes here, like for instance, the dynamic damping slider doesn't work now under this tune here, but you can see the numbers are pretty high, 67 and 70 on the P gains. So obviously, this is a 2.5-inch with 1303 motors at 5,000 kV. I think these numbers are going to be okay. They look a little on the high side, so if I experience any issues, then I'll probably dial these back a little bit. But I think these are probably going to be okay. And then, dynamic idle value of 35 seems about right. And then here we're going to go ahead and I'm going to change my rate settings to what I like. I typically like the default rates and put in some expo, so do that. And then under filters, again, it looks like they brought in the filters for that official tune. And so we're just going to go with this. So it looks like it's pretty basic. Might be a little bit aggressive, but if it is, then you'll know right away the quad will start shaking like crazy if it's way too aggressive, and then you'll have to dial back the numbers. But otherwise, this is a good starting point. It's a lot of these official tunes are a good baseline. And then from there, you can tweak it to, your particular build, because not every tune is going to work for every build. There's a lot of variables involved. And then I think the last thing I'm going to change here is, under receiver, we're using the Crossfire protocol because it's Express LRS. And we'll just leave everything as defaults here. And then, of course, under the modes, I'm going to put in my special modes for my transmitter here. I'm not going to show you what those are, because what goes in here might not work with your radio, so I don't want to confuse you. You'll have to, find out, for example, arming, which is the most important one. What channel is that on? Most people put it on aux 1. I put it on aux 4 because I'm just different. Most people put it on aux 1, and then usually arming is set to high. This is your typical, most people set up like this. And then you would have to obviously have your radio match that. If it isn't matching, then you're going to have problems. For example, if your radio on that channel is reversed and you go to high, it'll be armed when you plug it in, which is not good. That could be really bad. So make sure that you test this before you actually plug in the battery or put on your props. Make sure that you're not arming on plug-in. Just double check that when in your settings. All right, so here's the finished build with everything on here except for the props. I haven't put the props on. And here's a look at the bottom. I am using the included landing feet that came with the frame. And I'm going to talk about this specific frame and the whole build and everything, like specific details about this build in its own video. So that'll be on the main channel. Not exactly sure when, not too long from now. Because I want to compare this to the previous version of this frame that I built last year. But yeah, this is what it looks like. I got everything on here except for the props. I attached the Express LRS receiver there under the camera with some VHB. You can see if the camera will focus. Yeah, it should be able to. I don't think it'll fall off because the receiver is pretty light. It's one of those ones with the little tower antennas, or ceramic tower antennas. Did put some, this battery strap came with the frame. I put some sticky pad stuff here that I had just lying around on the top plates because I had to use these screws that were a bit longer. It kind of sticks out to mount the naked air unit. So again, I'll talk about all that stuff in that video, so they'll be over on the main channel, but that's pretty much it for this video in terms of, sort of a generic build tutorial, obviously specifically for this one, but you should be able to apply those details to other types of builds. But this is kind of a simple build because basically you have a bottom section and a top section. They just kind of fit together really nice. Really easy build overall. I think if I didn't include all the filming that I did here, I think I spent maybe 40 minutes on the entire build, so from start to finish. So, pretty easy to do these micro builds, especially when you're using an all-in-one that has the ESC and the flight controller together, and then you just simple, like an air unit here and an Express LRS receiver. Everything's plug and play, and you're pretty much ready to go. Okay, that'll do it for this video. Questions, comments down in the comment section below. If you have any requests for specific videos or expansion videos that you saw in this video, you want some more details in a further video, let me know in the comments below as well. That'll do it for this one. Talk to you guys in the next video.